Thanks to all who've joined us. I'm really encouraged by your involvement in programs like this, as well as your ongoing support for MSU. And of course, I hope that we're going to be able to meet in person soon. Tonight, as you've heard, I'm delighted to be here with our Executive Vice President for the Health Sciences, Dr. Norm Beauchamp. In 2019, when I first arrived, I restructured the administration of our health colleges and programs to be better aligned with our patient care, educational programs, and research. That change included the promotion of Norman J. Beauchamp, Jr., MD, MHS, who was Dean of the College of Human Medicine, to the position of Executive Vice President of Health Sciences. I've been so excited about EVP's Beauchamp's leadership. Norm is focused on improving clinical practice and creating educational opportunities for students in the health sciences. He sees the strength of each individual college and is leveraging opportunities for shared resource and administrative efficiencies. Additionally, he brings a wealth of experience to the task and a deep understanding and commitment to the role MSU can play in improving lives through advances in healthcare. So Norm, I'm so delighted you decided to join me in the executive team at MSU, specifically to lead in the health sciences. As leader of the Office of Health Sciences at MSU, can you speak to your vision for realizing some of the goals for its creation and what's next in terms of synergy?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I'm incredibly happy to be here at MSU, actually to return home to MSU, and I thank you for the appointment. I'll begin with maybe an aphorism that all people have the ability and deserve the opportunity to improve the health and well-being of others. What that means is that if there is a person out there who wants a career in health, MSU has to be the place that removes the barriers and gives them the opportunity to train for a future in health. That can be a career in nursing, in medicine, as has been our focus, or so many pathways across the university. It's what a land-grant institution does. Also, all people deserve access to health, hope, and healing. Health, hope, and healing. And by bringing together the 3 health colleges in the clinical practice, we've been able to go directly at trying to improve access to health for the state of Michigan. And I'm incredibly proud of the work in the 3 colleges. For example, in our College of Nursing, a big focus for them has to bring care closer to home and help people manage chronic illness. For the College of Human Medicine, they've really driven the development of connecting research, education, and clinical care. You see that manifesting in a doubling of the NIH funding, which is really how research is obtained, and what's happened in Grand Rapids, as well as the work in Flint, where we were first responders. For the College of Osteopathic Medicine, so much of their focus is really training physicians for the state of Michigan. They've done a wonderful job at developing global health, for example, in malaria, and also at looking at some of the cancer mechanisms of disease with the Department of Pharmacology. When I think about the creation of the Office of Health Sciences, it really is synergy, as you touched on. I think the first synergy is in education. We know that team healthcare is the best healthcare. So by starting to bring the colleges together, we can look at interprofessional education. I think the second is really in terms of the clinical practice. We are committed to being a high quality, low cost provider. And again, that's done best by coming together. In terms of research, how do we grow MSU's healthcare research? That's an area of passion for you. And so we're starting to combine the pre and post awards and making the pursuit of research easier for the clinicians and the scientists to come together. And then ultimately, it is to make this the place for people who want to train to provide patient-centered, family-centered care.
So that's an outstanding summary. And I think, again, I appreciate your leadership in bringing these 3 colleges together towards a very important goal. And I think one of the things as I think about our strategic plan that's coming forward, and I think you and I share this passion for improving health. And I think one of the things we've talked a lot about is issues around health disparities and a strategy that could really improve health in the state of Michigan. And so within the strategic plan, one of our pillars of the plan is health sustainability. Can you talk a little bit more about that pillar and its relevance to us at Michigan State University?
Yes, I'm delighted to. And one of the blessings that we have is having a university president who is a physician who cares so deeply about health. And I'll reference what I think people want in health, which is no one left out, no unnecessary pain and suffering, no needless deaths, no helplessness in those served or serving, no waste. And when we think about where we are in healthcare, if we're going to get there, it's going to take the strengths across the university. And that's why I was so delighted when you really supported this concept of one of the pillars being health sustainability. And I see that effort really broken down in the following ways. The first way is that if we are going to be there to provide the best for the communities we serve, we have to make sure that we're a healthy community and that we're a safe community for our students, our faculty, and our staff. And so it's really embracing the best in wellness and health for the campus as we seek to serve the needs of others and accomplish our missions of research, education, and training. The second part of this is really working closely with communities. Working with communities to identify their strengths, their resources, their needs, and their goals, and how can we, in partnership, connect with them to help improve the health of their community. It really is why a university exists, which is to serve the community and the state. And so that's the second part of health sustainability. The third part of health sustainability is really the mobilization of all of the university in this effort. For example, in 2017, health was the #1 employer in the U.S. And there are so many pathways to a career in health. It can be comm arts, it can be supply chain, it can be vet medicine, it can be certainly nursing. And so how do we bring that together? So one of the pillars within health sustainability is mobilizing the strengths and creating pathways for those that want a career in health. And then fourth is really focusing directly on healthcare and how we can scale the work that we do through partnering across the state. And those partnerships will be with other healthcare institutions, certainly Henry Ford, here in Lansing, Sparrow, McLaren, Spectrum, other partners, but then it also will be industry and academic partnerships. And in so doing, we'll lessen health disparities, but we also will go after improving and addressing some of the social determinants of health by doing things like job creation, right? Giving people better access to foods in a healthy environment. And so it's really coming together in those ways, both internally and externally, to improve the health of our state.
So that's so exciting, I think, as I think about it. And one of the things you and I have talked about many times, and I continue to make this kind of word order thing, we're not just Michigan State University, we're Michigan's State University. And I think that possessive is important. And I think, that is what we've been trying to do in healthcare, where we've been trying to choose partners that allow us to work with them in ways that will improve delivery of healthcare, not just in one part of the state, but all over the state, I think should be our goal. So I'm really excited about that going forward. And these, I think, are partnerships that can differ between the hospitals sometimes or the health organizations and us in terms of what the primary goals are. But I think the same ultimate goal is there. And that, again, is to improve the health of the people of Michigan. So, as I just said, you're passionate about bringing health to all, and I think in healing to all. And I think you have been a leader in partnerships between academia and industry, because they're one more way we can have a path to getting there. Can you give us an example of some of the kinds of partnerships that MSU is engaged in right now?
Yes, absolutely, Sam. We're in a knowledge economy where the pace of knowledge development is so quick. And a lot of industries are not focused as much on the foundational research, and it's a piece that academia can connect. So the first part of the academic industry partnerships, which is one arc, is that it really is synergistic. And a key part of that is that right now it takes about 15 years to go from discovering what is a way to improve human health to its implementation. So one of the areas that we've worked really actively in is, can we shorten that cycle time to bring health closer to individuals? And so one or two nice examples of industry academic partnerships is the partnership with Perrigo. So Perrigo is a $5 billion home health company. Their goal is to bring healthcare solutions to people closer to their home. And when we think about what our goal is in health innovation, it is things like wellness, prevention, lower cost access to care. And so as we think about Perrigo's goals and MSU's goals, it's innovation in the same direction. Another company, Banff, is looking at how do you develop cancer treatments that are low cost, accessible, and aren't injuring to the person. And Doug Meyer, who is a friend of MSU, shares with folks that he had advanced prostate cancer. And by virtue of some of his access to resources, he went to a facility in Europe where they were able to both diagnose and treat his cancer. And his cancer, which was felt to be end stage, was in remission. So in partnering with this company called Banff and Doug Meyer, we were able to take that technology and bring it to Michigan and put it in our innovation park in Grand Rapids. So this was another example of, there was a company that was willing to develop these therapies. There was an inspired partner in the community who was also bothered that we couldn't give people access to health. And together, we then were able to provide a type of care that's not otherwise available. When we think about other partnerships, we can look here in the Lansing community as McLaren is bringing up this new hospital and cancer center right at the edge of our campus. We're going to be able to improve the quality of care in the community, and that in turn attracts other groups that want to partner with us. Henry Ford, another example. And as we form these partnerships, coming back maybe to an earlier question, President Stanley, is one of the things that's really attractive to partners, industry partners, health system partners, is the strength of MSU. We're unique to have two medical schools, a nursing school with nurses in every county training in the state, a veterinary medicine school, comm arts focused on change in health. And so it really is finding ways to take the strengths of MSU and focus on its mission, and then find others that share the same goals of trying to bring health, hope, and healing.
So that's a great summary. And again, I remain so excited about some of the work that's going on. I think we'll return maybe to some of the miracles that are happening in Grand Rapids. And I think the Doug Meyer Pavilion on Research is a really great example of that, because as you said, it's an example of someone who experienced something, learned from it, and then is bringing cutting edge technology back to their home. Really a wonderful story, and I'm excited to see this get into action. So Norm, one of the things that you and I have focused a lot on is diversity, equity, inclusion. And as you know, it's a priority for me, it's a priority for the university, and I know it's a priority for you. Talk a little more about Henry Ford in Southeast Michigan and how that alliance really helps us move DEI forward potentially.
Yeah, thank you. Martin Luther King Jr. said of all forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and inhuman. And you can look at the higher incidence of cardiovascular disease, cancer, stroke in underrepresented communities as well as in rural communities. And it's something that we have to go directly at. And as we were looking at how MSU could really expand its impact to bring health, hope, and healing, we looked for partners that had really a similar commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we found Henry Ford, who've been lauded a number of times for their commitment. And what we found in identifying them as a partner is a few things. First, their clinical practice, they're about a $6 billion a year health system. They have 2,000 physicians, 6,000 nurses. And as we've talked about, one of the goals we have is to really transform health and make it accessible and affordable to all. And so we believe that in bringing together our research, education, and clinical strengths at Michigan State with the clinical delivery arm of Henry Ford, that we can make a significant impact in giving people access to affordable care. Another piece of this is, just as we have a really strong public health effort in Flint that's just an amazing job of focusing on health disparities, Henry Ford has an incredible public health division in Detroit. And we see those coming together again towards our goal of dissolving health disparities in our state by 2030. Another key part of this is they have a very large residency training program. We have a very large medical school and nursing program. And the idea of bringing those together as well is we see that as a way to really recruit and retain students from underrepresented communities. It's an interesting fact that there used to be large health disparities between men and women, and it coincided with big disparities in the number of physicians, for example, that were men and the physicians that were women. Way more physicians were men. And as we close that gap and it's now balanced, you saw those health disparities also go. And so what we see in this partnership as well is that we'll be able to further enhance our ability to recruit and retain underrepresented students, residents, and then ultimately faculty members. The final thing that I want to mention is we're going to make a primary focus cancer and access to clinical trials. And Henry Ford does about 1,000 clinical trials a year. Our numbers are much smaller here at Michigan State. And so by combining our strengths, we'll be able to really focus on inclusiveness in these clinical trials so that what we discover in health will be generalizable to all people.
So I'm so excited about this, as you and I have talked about it. I think the alliance with Henry Ford is a very important component of our ability to deal with health disparities, certainly in Southeast Michigan, but I think in the state as a whole. And I think the partnership at the highest level is exciting. And I look at Wright Lassiter as one of the outstanding leaders in healthcare, and I think the opportunity to work with him, for me, has been a great pleasure. And Norm, your work in helping to bring this alliance to bear on these issues, I think, has been so important as well. And you mentioned the clinical components, the educational components, and their very positive impact on DEI. And of course, and I know you're at the forefront of this, but the research components are so exciting too, as you've talked about. So the opportunity to get into clinical trials, which can make a difference, but also the opportunity to get into bench research and then translate that immediately to this incredible clinical operation that Henry Ford has is very much exciting as well. So there's lots to benefit from this, and we really appreciate this partnership going forward. So let's come back to Flint for a second, because when I was looking at Michigan State University and making a decision to come here, 3 years ago, one of the things I was most excited about was the work Michigan State University was doing at Flint. Really was a first responder to the water crisis, but that has evolved in so many different ways. And so now I think our work there really is a model for how engagement can be done with community, really a model for asset-based community partnerships. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that reflects how we should work with other communities, and maybe tie it into our role in extension in this land-grant institution as well? That's a tall order, but I know you can handle it.
Bless you. It's such an important point. is, as we've talked about previously, the purpose of the university, and you really emphasize this, is to serve. And in serving, one has to be respectful that what people don't need is an outside force to come in like the cavalry and really say, these are your problems, here's the solution, you're welcome, right? Rather, it is to respect that within our rich communities lie so many resources, so many assets, such expertise. And an asset-based approach really says that our job really is to be a partner, to listen, to learn, to work with the community, the organizations within the communities, the leaders, the people of the community, and really find out what are the challenges they think are the ones that need to be addressed, and what are the solutions that they want to pursue, and then work together to help resource those in partnership, and to then find out, once those are identified, are there strengths in the organization that can be mobilized? And so when the Flint water crisis occurred, we had boots on the ground, but one of the things that I think was really differentiating is we worked with the leaders in the community to determine what were the types of individuals that we should recruit to help address this. And it was in that partnership that we brought in some of the world leaders, actually, in public health. And the successes have been tremendous. We've got support now to create a registry for the entire city of Flint so that we can help the children of Flint gain access to resources that are needed as they seek to recover from the lead crisis. We have worked with foundations to garner support to help recruit the best and brightest, and it has become our fastest growing research division. And as you touched on nicely, President Stanley, one of the reasons that Henry Ford reached out to us is they saw the work that had happened in Flint. They saw how the discovery at Michigan State had grown to $800 million, and they saw the value of connecting, the basic science to both public health and to clinical delivery. And it's really been remarkable. The other part is when we think about work that inspires, this has been incredibly engaging for our students, our faculty, both research and clinicians. And we see this, again, as we go forward, as one of the strengths of Michigan State. And it builds on the long history, again, of a land-grant college. You mentioned Flint as one of the things that brought you here in Extension. For me, it was Extension as well. Knowing that unique amongst leading universities is that we have a trusted voice through Extension in virtually every county in the state, combined with community health colleges. It really positions us to be a place that can work with communities to solve the problems they face, as opposed to many academic institutions are poised in a way that if you come to their quaternary health center, they can help you. Michigan State's different. We go to the community, we partner, and we work with them to figure out the best ways to bring health, hope, and healing.
And I really saw that when I visited. So one of the highlights I've had this year, when we finally were able to do some visits with COVID still out there, was to have a chance to visit Flint and meet some of the amazing people there and the work they're doing, and tour some of the facilities that they have there as well. And again, it's something I think everybody in MSU and all alums can be very proud of the work we're doing to try to work with the community, as you said, not for the community, but with the community, to really improve things in terms of health disparities there. And overall, it's a very holistic approach to health. So it really gets into nutrition, not just into the classic things we think about for medicine. So one of the things I think that's unique about the partnership that we developed, particularly at Grand Rapids, has been this idea of working directly in public-private partnerships. So to really work with industry or commercial partners to develop what has become the Grand Rapids Innovation Park. Can you tell us a little more about this approach and how much can we replicate this in other challenges or other needs we have for the university?
The partnership with community is so essential as we go forward to meeting the goals and the mission of the institution. One of the things that I was struck by when I visited in 2016 was the intentionality of the community to set goals that mattered and then to support them. And what I saw, for example, in Grand Rapids was this coming together of community leaders to first help fund a medical school and then to help fund a research building. And that's one important part of public-private partnerships is the philanthropy. And without that, the things that we try to do would not be possible. But what then came together was what is a somewhat new mechanism of how do you then connect to industry. And what we were able to do is we had the property in Grand Rapids, and we went out to the private sector and said, we're going to recruit industry partners, health system partners, to occupy a building. And we're going to de-risk the building by getting a commitment to a lease that these companies would occupy this space, Michigan State would occupy. And what the partners allowed us to do, or at least that we built into the RFP, is that Michigan State would retain the right to choose who were the groups that moved into the building. Because ultimately what we were trying to do is connect our research, education, and clinical mission with industry partners or health system partners that wanted to bring care to patients in a more accessible, affordable way. And what we were able to do was to put this out for proposals. We attracted a number of companies. I mentioned Beauchamp, I mentioned Perigo. We're also able to garner further philanthropic support from the Meyer family, for example. And then this allowed us to have a private company build 2 buildings on the campus. And these buildings now give us additional space to house MSU scientists and create a rich environment for students and faculty. And in turn, it also allowed us to form new contracts with industry for research support and make us competitive for NIH funding. And all this was done in a way that didn't cost Michigan State, but in essence was a revenue stream. And it created this in a way that said, our mission is important, we're great at partnering, and we can do this better together. And so this mechanism, I think, is one that's really important to the future of Michigan State. We see a similar model that has worked with the Mott Foundation in Michigan State and Flint, and we're looking at expanding that. And we see that as a mechanism to create industry academic partnerships further here in Lansing as well as in Detroit. And certainly it's a very scalable model and really important. I'd also emphasize that, when I got here, I met with our students, and they said, we really want to have access to cutting-edge tools and equipment. And again, the philanthropic support that we get is transformative for that. But at the same point, finding industry partners who can also create that milieu is really important. So yes, public-private partnerships, really critical. And maybe I'll just emphasize, one of the things I like to commit to our philanthropic partners, and some are with us today, is that if you commit resources to MSU, we absolutely are going to leverage those and bring the biggest return for them. And this public-private partnership is just one way that by contributing, 1, the mission will be impactful, 2, we'll leverage it, and 3, it'll be scalable.
So, one of the things I think we know is that humans are very visual creatures, and the ability to see something helps us understand it. And I think about breakthroughs in science. So you think about the telescope and Galileo and how that changed our view of ourselves and our place in the universe. You think about the microscope and our ability to actually see bacteria, and then afterwards with the viruses, and how much of a difference that made in our ability to understand disease, and really changed our models of disease completely. And nowadays, I think some of the things that have taken place in medicine, particularly as I look at magnetic resonance imaging, invented in part at Stony Brook University, my old home, and many other new tools, it really has changed the way we practice medicine. So you are a neurointerventional radiologist, in addition to your public health background, and of course you're committed to improving diagnosis and prevention, and in your cases, in interventionist therapies. So can you talk about how MSU right now is or can become a global leader in imaging sciences?
Yeah, thank you. And again, some of the joy as they were recruiting our president, right, knowing that you were the vice president of research at WashU, which was a leader in imaging, and then at Stony Brook, the work that was done there, I was really excited about. I'll share that as some know, I was an undergraduate student at Michigan State. And I was in my philosophy course, and the teacher of philosophy also happened to be the chair of radiology at Michigan State. He showed me MRI of the brain. This was a long time ago, and I just immediately felt that if you could see it, you could cure it. And so I very much resonate with what you said, President Stanley. And MSU actually was one of the early leaders in imaging and imaging sciences, dating back to MSU having the #1 nuclear physics graduate program in the country, and being an early leader in what's called molecular imaging, which is this ability to monitor physiologic processes, but without having to, you could do it remotely. And in so doing, you could look at cancer, you could look at stroke, you could look at Alzheimer's and other disease mechanisms and study them in a way that could give you fundamental insights. And when I was, again, 2016, thinking about coming back, I started to look at the assets that were here that were remarkable. The EFRIB, right, which is the leading particle accelerator in the world, will be, and it's going to create nuclear medicine particles that will allow us to diagnose and treat disease in ways that nobody else can. The Engineering College of Human Medicine, NATSI, came together to create the Institute for Quantitative Health, and that was 2016, 2017, and we recruited some of the best imaging scientists in the country, in part because of the history of molecular imaging, in part because of the history with the EFRIB. And now our partnerships with Henry Ford in cancer, our partnerships with McLaren in cancer, the work we've been doing in Grand Rapids in cancer, and imaging is a key part of that. This company that I mentioned, this idea of therapy and diagnostics, one of the things that became possible in Grand Rapids is a center that I mentioned that came to us from Europe and is now here, which is therapy and diagnostics combined. And so we really are poised. And then the other thing that we've looked at presently is this idea that part of our goal is not just to be the place that's developing the treatments of the future and bringing treatments from afar and being first in U.S., but it's also how do we improve care across the state of Michigan. And so we formed a group called Spartan Radiology, which is now the third largest radiology group in the country. And again, our reach is statewide. And as we think about the piece that's missing, one part was the clinical outreach of a partner with the scope and scale of Henry Ford. The second now is really physician scientists. And so what we're seeking to do is to recruit people who maybe just like I did back in the day, were able to connect the engineering, the physics, and the chemistry to the clinical care so that we can take all of the things we're able to develop and bring it to patients more quickly. But it's been remarkable just over the last 5 years how we have really positioned ourselves to be a global leader in imaging sciences. It's been actually really fun because I've gotten a number of calls because of my background in radiology where department chairs across the country are saying, what are you guys doing there? So it's been really fun. And I see it as a way, again, to provide accessible, affordable care that minimizes the difficulties for patients as they undergo therapies.
Very nice.
So, if I may, I have a question for you,
Sure.
my friend. We'd be remiss if we did not talk about MSU's response to COVID-19, especially as we transition back to in-person classes and look to fall sports. I've appreciated having you at the helm over the last 18 months, and I think what would be helpful to those with us today is, can you give us an update on what's happening now?
So I'd be happy to do that. And first, I just have to say that it's very much been a team effort in dealing with this challenge. And while it is true that I am a specialist in infectious disease, I have a lot to learn, as everyone else does, about this particular virus and the pandemic. And so I think it's been a learning experience for all of us. But we've really come together as a community to deal with it. And these have been difficult circumstances, but people have really risen to the occasion. And now so many students are so excited now to get back onto campus. And I spent yesterday at Convocation. I got to welcome 9,200 plus first-year students, along with some of the second-year students who hadn't been on campus before. We filled the Breslin Center, and it was incredibly exciting to see those students there. And every one of them inside that center was wearing their face mask, which was absolutely something we required. So it was an inspiring sight. Tonight, before I came here, I went to something called Spartan Spectacular, and I got to see, hopefully with 15,000 of my closest friends on the grassy area around Cherry Lane, and talking and visiting with them and understanding for them, how they anticipated and how excited they were about coming back. And they are so excited about it coming back, as I said, but they're also so willing to do the things that are necessary to keep them safe. And many of them talked about how they'd been vaccinated. Many of them talked about their understanding of the mask mandate because they want to come back and they want to be safe. So I think what we've been trying to do from the beginning is find ways to return to work now this fall and return to education in the safest possible way. So we've done a number of things to try and ensure that. One is, of course, we decided in July to require faculty, students, and staff to be vaccinated against COVID-19. There's a deadline of August 31st for this, which happens to be today, and we're following that. The response has been very strong. We've now identified more than about 44,000 individuals have responded, and the large majority of those, 90+%, are vaccinated, which is really reassuring for us as we come back. At the same time, because of Delta, and the data we saw about the possibility even of vaccinated people transmitting COVID-19, and we were concerned, our faculty and staff particularly were concerned that they might, even though they'd been vaccinated, contract disease and transfer it to someone at home, who might be a child, for example, or someone who is immunocompromised. So we made the decision to return to a mask mandate as well, particularly since CDC is recommending it for our region. So between mandatory vaccination for faculty, staff, and students, and between mask wearing for now, for mask mandate for now, I think we're in a very good position to return. We have people coming back to dormitories, we have people coming back to classrooms, and we're doing everything we can to get a return to normalcy. But it is a challenge. It's definitely a challenge, and it really requires us to come together as a community. So you and others have been very helpful in helping us set these policies and helping us communicate these policies, because that's incredibly important. We can't just set these things down and expect people to adhere to them. We need to communicate, and people want to understand why. They want to understand what the rationale is. So we've made a continuous effort to be medically and scientifically grounded behind the decisions we make. And of course, we do follow the rules that DHHS has set up for the state of Michigan. We tend to follow CDC guidelines lines as well. But we also, again, want to make sure always we're doing what's best for people of Michigan State. So it's been a real team effort, as I said. I'm so impressed by the students and the way they're responding, and I think we're going to do well. There'll be some cases on campus, and we're not going to avoid that. This is a highly contagious disease, particularly a Delta variant. But I think by having so many people vaccinated, by following the mask mandate, we're going to really limit the possibilities of large outbreaks on campus, and that's what we're looking forward to doing. So students can continue their education, continue to attend classes in person, and again, get involved in the kind of activities I saw them interested in Spartan Spectacular tonight. So long answer, but I'm very excited about it. And again, I want to thank you and a number of other members on the team who've been critical in helping make these decisions. So I'm gonna get back at you, and these are some questions now that have been submitted by the audience, and so we have time for just a couple, I think, of these. So for you, Norm, this is, COVID-19 has created more stress essentially in healthcare, and particularly for our frontline workers, particularly early on in the pandemic, but now with the surge that's been taking place in other states, there's tremendous stress for people. How do you prepare students for the emotional strain of working in healthcare? And that's by Linda Nudera, an alumna who retired from the Bill George Youth Football League of Elmhurst, Illinois.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. That's a really critical question, and about 40% of people in healthcare experience burnout, which is this sense of hopelessness and dread, and certainly that has amplified over the last 18 months with what is, referred to as compassion fatigue, to see so many people struggling, families and individuals, and being them, that we have just really made it a focus to build a culture of caring, where we build into our curriculum this idea of supporting each other. We think that an emphasis on interprofessional education, where people feel like they're a part of a team, can be really helpful. Each of the health colleges have a wellness arm built into those, so that when students are feeling stress, we can support them. And then most recently, for example, our College of Nursing is building into their simulation training, how to really work with patients and families when they're grieving, and then how to support each other in the times after you've done that. We really see it as absolutely a priority for support.
So thank you for that. So this is also a question for you. How will Michigan State University work to create interprofessional education opportunities in other health professions, such as medical laboratory science and dietetics?
Wonderful. It's neat that, and I should have commented in the prior question, it goes directly at really the first arm of the strategic plan that we're in the process of approving for sustainable health, which is really the health and wellness of those serving. This second question for interprofessional really goes to another one of the pillars that right now we do a lot of interprofessional education. We do it through, in the College of Human Medicine, what is the shared discovery training. And there's a number of occasions where we bring the students together from the different colleges. But what we see going forward as one of the outcomes of the strategic plan is bringing together students from across the university as we approach improving health. So it really is a key strategy for us going forward. I think we do a nice job of that in the health sciences, nursing, College of Osteomed, College of Human Medicine. But as you suggest, there's a great opportunity to do more. And certainly when our students are in their clinical rotations, they work closely with all of their clinical colleagues, again, understanding team medicine. But I think the opportunity to further embed that in the curriculum and in the health tracks will create campus-wide, will allow us to do more there.
Thank you so much. And that question was submitted by, it's Kathy, and it's D-O-I-G is her last name. And I don't know if that's Doig or Doig. I'm not sure, and I apologize if I didn't get it right. But Kathy is retired faculty from Biomed Lab Diagnostics Program at MSU. So thank you for that question. And I hope, I know Dr. Beauchamp answered it. So here's another question that was it's listed for you, but I'm going to answer part of it after you're done, maybe, depending on what you say. And this is, with the rise of new tools such as artificial intelligence, what new areas of medical research are enabled?
Yeah, and this comes from John, who was well known to both of us, who is actually quite visionary in all of these things. So John's answers would be interesting as well. I can tell you artificial intelligence, which is really this concept of computers being able to do some of the work that humans do, or at least assist in that work, has a huge role in health. For example, as was mentioned, my background is in radiology, and we've used artificial intelligence support systems to help us improve diagnosis. And so you're able to do things like better identify cancer, better identify stroke, and it's really a key part of what is the future. As we talk about this concept I mentioned before, theranostics, combining therapy and diagnosis, it's incredibly complex to integrate things like a patient's genetic information, the imaging findings, the lab findings, the path findings, to really tailor in a personalized medicine, personalized health approach. And really, artificial intelligence is absolutely going to be a key part of that. I also see it, a subset of this is really machine learning, which is where it not only is a replacement or a supplement to humans, but it makes new and fundamental observations that helps you see things that you might not realize are there. And as we look at an increasing requirement to provide care for larger numbers of individuals and an explosion of health information, some of the machine learning can help us develop the new insights to find ways to prevent disease in ways that we might not be able to previously. Another area that I'll mention is predictive analytics, which is that artificial intelligence is now being used to be able to take factors and say, this individual is more likely to develop sepsis or for their stroke to progress in the next few hours. So it allows you to be preemptive because, again, you're able to integrate large bits of information. The final I'll mention, and then I'll turn it back to Rose and Stanley, is drug discovery. And we've seen opportunities there where by using artificial intelligence, we can screen, for example, all of the medications that have ever been used, the mechanisms in which they're used, and then look at new diseases that don't have treatments but might have similar mechanisms. And so we're becoming recognized as a place that is using artificial intelligence to find therapies to disease that exist but haven't previously been used for that purpose.
So that's a great answer, and you've really, I think, from detailed to 32,000 feet, I think have covered it really well. So I'm just going to give a personal, more personal view and maybe a less scholarly view, and that is that, my specialty, infectious diseases, really involved, as you said, information processing. It involved, taking a history in the patient. It involved synthesizing that with data, and then coming up with a list of possibilities for what could explain the illness, and that included infectious disease, but also could be other diseases, autoimmune diseases, other things that could cause a syndrome that might look like an infectious disease. So this was all going on, based on the reading I've done, the education I've had, and the clinical experience I had. I think, very fast in time ahead of us will be a handheld that, knows far more than I do, has had the input from thousands and tens of thousands, hundred thousands of cases, millions of cases of some kind entered into it, and will be able to take a history, take the results of an exam, exam, take the results of laboratory studies, and basically generate a differential diagnosis that's far more specific and accurate than humans can do. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that. And I am, concerned. Norm is in a wonderful specialty of radiology, and one of my future son-in-laws is also a radiologist. But I worry a little that AI, from the things he talked about, and machine learning, may reach the point where the images no longer are viewed by a human necessarily, but simply analyzed by a computer, which then can print out and say, with 99.9% certainty, there's a lesion located in this part, and based on the density and everything else that we can learn about it, it's likely to be a malignancy of this type and requires a biopsy. And so, and again, that'll probably result in better clinical care. Will it be as perfect as human? Norm, you and I can talk about it, but I think that is potentially a part of the future for medicine. There still will be roles for individuals and people in this. I think there still will be, but I do think we're going to get to a point where the Watsons of the world, or things that are far more sophisticated, provide the AI that will change medicine. I think for the positive overall, but I'm nostalgic for when people were dependent on people like you and me, and it still exists, but dependent on people like you and me to make these differentials. So I think I guess what I'll do two last questions if we have time. And so the first one will be for you, Norm, and that's, what have you most appreciated since becoming MSU's Executive Vice President for the Health Sciences? What's been the general kind of things that you've enjoyed the most?
Yeah, I think the realization of the possible, right? I think one of the challenges is when you see something that seems addressable and you don't feel like you're moving the dial. And what has been really exciting is this convergence across the health sciences, and really this coming together of the university, I think makes virtually everything possible in terms of improving human health. And that's been really, really compelling. I think I was really inspired by how the health sciences, so many people came together to help support the university. Our students, our faculty, our staff, our communities, and our response to COVID. And so it links to just how delightful it's been to see the generosity and the compassion of the people across. I've been really delighted by that. And then third, I think how it's now factoring, it's becoming a part of the strategic plan, the role that we can play in health as a university, and health sciences place in that. I've just been really inspired and appreciative of that.
So there was a question for me, which was, what are you looking forward to as MSU begins the fall semester? And so many different things, I would say, but I think the major thing, has been the return of students, faculty and staff to campus. It's so wonderful to see our beautiful campus with people on it, to see buildings occupied again, to see students beginning their journey for the first time, to see students returning to campus to continue that journey. And as we've talked about before, I think if you were here, you would really appreciate the excitement people bring. We're having record turnouts, essentially, for many of the events we do, like the Spartan Spectacular. Some events that took place last night have larger crowds than they've ever had before. And of course, as I mentioned, our convocation, I'm sure, was the largest crowd in MSU history, attended that. So people are not only back, but they're enthusiastic. They want to get engaged again in college life. And I know I speak for our faculty and staff to say how excited they are again to be welcoming students. It's still challenging. We have the health challenges to deal with, as everyone knows, in COVID-19. And also in some areas we're relatively short-staffed. As everyone knows, there's some employment shortages right now nationally. So people are working harder than they ever had before. But that is the spirit I've seen at Michigan State University from the first time I came here, is the spirit of Spartans will and can do. So I think that, to me, is what I'm most excited about. So I think I'm going to wrap up now, and I want to thank you, Norm. We're so fortunate to have you at Michigan State University. I also want to thank everyone who joined us this evening, and your interest in learning more about MSU's plans for the future is something I found to be extraordinary among our alumni and donors. And frankly, we as a university are successful because of Spartans like you who remain informed and engaged. Well, we concluded the Empower Extraordinary campaign before my arrival. I know that Michigan State University is stronger because of it. And I'm very grateful for those of you who supported the campaign priorities and invested in our future. And I'm especially thankful, or equally thankful rather, to Spartans who stepped forward after the campaign to help students who face financial challenges because of COVID-19. To see this level of support for our students during such a pivotal time is truly inspiring. Another capital campaign will be undertaken in the years ahead, and we will be looking to our community of loyal Spartans like all of you here for advice and guidance. So as always, thank you for being committed to the Spartan community. Our efforts to create success for our students and community couldn't happen without your support. So finally, my two favorite words, go green!
Go away.